There was a time when darkness brought silence, not the imposed silence of regulations or restrictions, but a natural settling that occurred as daylight faded and communities turned inward. Evening quiet emerged gradually, predictably, like tide returning to familiar shores. The transition began with sounds rather than their absence. Screen doors closing as children were called inside, car engines settling as neighbors returned from work, the distant whistle of trains carrying freight through towns where most people would be asleep by the time the last car passed. Porch lights came on one by one, yellow circles of warmth against gathering dusk. Families gathered on front steps and back porches, speaking in voices that automatically lowered as night approached. Conversations became more intimate, more thoughtful, as if darkness itself requested a different quality of communication. Children learned evening rhythms without being taught them. They absorbed the knowledge that certain hours called for certain behaviors. Running and shouting belonged to daylight. Evening brought different activities, quieter games, indoor pursuits, preparation for sleep that would come naturally when full darkness arrived. Kitchens glowed with warm light as dinner preparation wound down and cleanup began. The sounds of washing dishes, putting away silverware, wiping down counters created gentle domestic music that marked the day's transition from active to restful. These routine sounds became evening's opening notes. Radio programming adapted to evening quiet, offering softer music and spoken programs that matched the contemplative mood that settled over households after dark. Dramatic programs, classical music, and gentle conversation replaced the livelier programming of daytime hours. Radio voices became evening companions rather than background noise. Reading gained prominence as evening entertainment. Living rooms arranged around comfortable chairs with good reading lamps rather than central entertainment devices. Families would scatter to favorite reading spots, creating companionable silence broken only by turning pages and occasional comments about interesting passages. The quality of light changed everything about evening activities. Soft yellow bulbs and table lamps created warm pools of illumination that drew families together in smaller spaces within larger rooms. Overhead lighting was harsh for evening relaxation, so households relied on gentler sources that naturally encouraged quieter activities. Homework occupied kitchen tables illuminated by pendant lights that cast circles of concentration. Children learned to associate evening with focused work, quiet study, and preparation for the next day's activities. The evening quiet supported concentration in ways that filled environments could not. Mothers would settle into familiar chairs with mending baskets beside them, taking advantage of good light and peaceful hours to repair clothing, darn socks, and maintain household linens. The rhythmic movements of hand sewing created meditative activities that fit naturally within evening's contemplative atmosphere. Fathers often retreated to workshops or studies where they pursued hobbies and personal interests that required concentration and careful attention. Model building, woodworking, reading technical materials, or planning household projects filled evening hours with productive yet peaceful activities. Teenage children discovered that evening quiet provided opportunities for private activities, diary writing, letter composition to distant friends, homework that required extended concentration. Evening solitude became a natural part of adolescent development in households that respected quiet hours. Bedtime routines began earlier and proceeded more gradually than in later decades. Without competing entertainment options, families naturally wound down as daylight disappeared. Evening activities moved seamlessly toward sleep preparation rather than fighting against natural circadian rhythms. The sounds that remained during evening quiet became more prominent and meaningful. Clocks ticking on mantelpieces, the settling sounds of wooden houses adjusting to temperature changes. the distant hum of electric refrigerators, occasional footsteps on wooden floors. These subtle sounds created evening soundtrack. Neighborhood sounds became more noticeable in evening quiet. Distant train whistles, occasional automobile traffic, dogs barking at unfamiliar sounds, the rustle of leaves in evening breezes. These natural and community sounds provided connection to the larger world without overwhelming individual household peace. Seasonal variations influenced evening quiet patterns significantly. Summer evenings extended outdoor activities later, with families sitting on porches until mosquitoes drove them inside. Children might play quiet games in yards until full darkness arrived, their voices carrying softly through warm air. Winter evenings brought earlier indoor gatherings around heat sources, creating cozy environments that encouraged quiet activities. Families would cluster around fireplaces, wood stoves, or radiators, sharing warmth while pursuing individual quiet activities within comfortable proximity to each other. Spring evenings offered the pleasure of opening windows to fresh air while maintaining indoor quiet activities. The sounds of awakening nature, birds settling for the night, spring rain on rooftops, gentle breezes through budding trees, enhanced rather than competed with household tranquility. Autumn evenings provided perfect conditions for indoor quiet time, with crisp air encouraging the closing of windows and the beginning of heating seasons that drew families into smaller, warmer spaces where quiet activities became more intimate and focused. Churches played evening roles beyond religious services. Evening prayer meetings, choir practices, and social gatherings provided community activities that respected evening's quieter character. Church bells marking evening hours became part of community soundscape rather than competing with louder entertainment. Evening church services were designed around contemplative worship that enhanced rather than competed with the natural quiet of approaching night. Organ music, hymn singing, and spoken prayers provided spiritual activity appropriate to evening's reflective character. Church fellowship halls hosted evening activities that supported community connection while maintaining appropriate noise levels for evening hours. Ladies' circles, men's groups, youth activities, and family programs operated within community expectations about evening quiet. Library evening hours accommodated people who sought quiet entertainment after work and dinner. Evening library visits became family activities, with parents and children selecting books for week-long reading projects. Libraries provided community quiet spaces that reinforced evening's contemplative character. Library reading rooms filled with people seeking quiet evening entertainment and education. Students used library evening hours for homework and study that required concentration and access to reference materials. Adults pursued personal learning and reading interests during peaceful library evening hours. Library programming during evening hours focused on activities appropriate to quiet environments, book discussions, lectures, educational presentations that enhanced rather than competed with evening tranquility. Libraries became community centers for quiet evening activities. Letter writing flourished during evening quiet hours. Kitchen tables became writing desks where families composed correspondence to distant relatives and friends. The evening quiet supported thoughtful communication that required concentration and careful word choice rather than quick responses. Letter writing sessions often involved multiple family members writing simultaneously at the same table, sharing the peaceful companionship of written communication. Parents writing to their own parents, children working on thank you notes, Teenagers corresponding with distant friends created family writing time. Letter reading also gained special significance during evening quiet, when important correspondence could be shared with family members and discussed thoughtfully. Evening letter reading became family activities that connected households with distant relatives and friends through shared written communication. Craft work and needlework gained prominence during evening hours, when good light and quiet concentration were available. Women gathered around kitchen tables or living room corners to work on sewing projects, knitting, embroidery, and other handwork that benefited from evening's focused atmosphere. Quilting circles met during evening hours when women could gather after household duties were completed. But while good artificial light was available for detailed work, these evening quilting sessions combined productive work with social connection and activities appropriate to quiet evening hours. Men's craft activities also found natural homes in evening quiet: wood carving, model building, mechanical tinkering that required concentration and careful attention. Home workshops became evening retreats, where men could pursue creative interests during peaceful hours. Children's games adapted to evening quiet requirements. Card games, board games, puzzles, and quiet indoor activities replaced the running and shouting of daytime play. Families developed evening game traditions that brought multiple generations together in shared quiet entertainment. Board game sessions became important family activities that provided entertainment appropriate to evening quiet while encouraging family interaction and friendly competition. Evening game time created family traditions that children remembered throughout their lives. Puzzle working became popular evening activity for individuals and families, providing quiet entertainment that could be pursued over extended periods. Jigsaw puzzles, word puzzles, and educational puzzles offered evening activities that challenged minds while respecting household quiet. Garden work continued into early evening hours as people tended vegetables and flowers during cooler temperatures. Evening garden time provided peaceful outdoor activity that didn't disturb neighbors while allowing people to enjoy remaining daylight for productive outdoor work. Evening garden activities focused on gentle tasks, appropriate to approaching darkness: watering plants, harvesting vegetables, deadheading flowers, planning garden improvements. These quiet outdoor activities connected people with natural rhythms while maintaining neighborhood tranquility. Garden planning often occurred during evening hours when people could sit outdoors and thoughtfully consider improvements and changes. Evening garden contemplation provided peaceful outdoor activity that enhanced rather than competed with neighborhood quiet. Evening meals became more leisurely events when families weren't competing with entertainment schedules. Dinner conversation gained importance as the primary evening social activity, with family members sharing daily experiences and planning upcoming activities during unhurried mealtimes. Family dinner conversations during evening quiet hours created opportunities for meaningful communication that might be rushed during busier times. Children shared school experiences. Parents discussed work and community activities. Families planned weekend and holiday activities during relaxed dinner hours. After dinner cleanup became family activities that provided opportunities for continued conversation while accomplishing necessary household tasks. Washing dishes, clearing tables, and preparing kitchens for morning activities created cooperative family time during peaceful evening hours. Elderly neighbors found companionship in evening routines that acknowledged the natural quiet of approaching night. Evening visits between older residents created social connection during peaceful hours that suited their energy levels and sleep schedules better than busy daytime activities. Evening visiting among neighbors became important social activities that provided community connection without requiring formal entertainment or elaborate preparation. Neighbors might gather on porches or in living rooms for conversation and simple refreshments during peaceful evening hours. Elderly people often became the keepers of evening, quiet traditions, maintaining earlier bedtimes and quieter evening activities that influenced neighborhood patterns and family expectations. Their consistency helped preserve community quiet expectations across generations. Weather awareness increased during evening quiet when outdoor sounds became more prominent and noticeable. People learned to read approaching storms through subtle sound changes that would be masked by louder environments. Evening quiet enhanced connection with natural weather patterns. Storm watching became popular evening activity when approaching weather could be observed and experienced more fully in quiet environments. Families might gather on covered porches or near windows to watch lightning, listen to thunder, and experience weather changes during dramatic evening storms. Weather preparation activities often occurred during evening hours when people had time to secure outdoor furniture, check window latches, and prepare homes for expected weather changes. Evening weather awareness became part of responsible household management. Evening chores gained meditative quality when performed in quiet environments. Feeding animals, securing property for the night, preparing homes for morning activities became peaceful routine activities rather than rushed necessities squeezed between entertainment options. Farm evening chores created rhythmic activities that connected rural families with agricultural cycles and animal care responsibilities. Feeding livestock, securing barns, checking equipment created productive evening work that fit naturally within quiet hours. Urban evening chores included activities like preparing clothes for the next day, organizing household supplies, checking door locks, and completing small maintenance tasks that contributed to smooth household operation. These routine activities gained importance in quiet evening environments. Community music events respected evening quiet by featuring softer performances appropriate to nighttime hours. Evening concerts, informal musical gatherings, and neighborhood singing groups provided entertainment that enhanced rather than competed with evening's natural tranquility. Family music activities flourished during evening quiet hours when household instruments could be played without competing with outside noise. Piano practice, family singing, and informal musical entertainment became natural evening activities that brought families together. Community singing groups often met during evening hours when voices could be heard clearly and participants could focus on musical activities without daytime distractions. Church choirs, community choruses, and neighborhood singing circles provided social music activities appropriate to evening hours. Walking became popular evening activity for people seeking gentle exercise and quiet social time. Evening walks through neighborhoods allowed neighbors to greet each other and maintain community connections while enjoying peaceful outdoor activity that didn't disturb others. Family walking traditions developed around evening exercise that provided opportunities for conversation, fresh air, and gentle physical activity appropriate to approaching bedtime. Evening family walks became routine activities that combined health benefits with family time. Solitary evening walking provided personal time for reflection, prayer, and quiet contemplation while enjoying outdoor exercise. Many people developed evening walking habits that supported both physical and mental health through peaceful outdoor activity. Small businesses adapted to evening quiet by closing earlier and respecting community rhythms. Stores that remained open during evening hours operated more quietly, with softer lighting and reduced activity levels that acknowledged their role in quiet evening environments. Local businesses that served evening customers developed appropriate practices that supported rather than competed with community quiet expectations. Pharmacies, small groceries, and service businesses operating evening hours maintained quiet operations that respected neighborhood tranquility. Busyness districts became quiet zones during evening hours when commercial activity ceased and retail areas became peaceful spaces that might be used for evening walking or casual evening activities that didn't require commercial services. Children's bedtime stories gained importance when evening entertainment options were limited. Parents developed elaborate storytelling traditions that provided imaginative entertainment appropriate to quiet evening hours, while helping children transition peacefully towards sleep. Bedtime story reading created family traditions that children anticipated and remembered throughout their lives. Parents might read classic children's literature, tell family stories, or create original tales that provided entertainment while encouraging eventual sleep. Family storytelling traditions often involved multiple generations, sharing stories during evening hours when quiet environments supported listening and imagination. Grandparents, parents, and children might share stories that preserve family history while providing evening entertainment. Evening bathing routines proceeded more slowly and deliberately when families weren't rushing to accommodate entertainment schedules. Bath time became relaxing preparation for sleep, rather than hurried hygiene necessity, contributing to overall evening wind-down patterns. Children's evening baths became leisurely activities that provided relaxation and preparation for sleep. Warm water, gentle bath products, and unhurried bathing routines helped children transition from active daytime activities to peaceful evening rest. Adult evening bathing provided personal relaxation time that supported stress relief and preparation for restful sleep. Evening bath routines became self-care activities that contributed to overall health and well-being through peaceful personal time. Home workshops and basement activities flourished during evening quiet when power tool noise would be inappropriate. Evening workshop time focused on hand tools and quiet projects that allowed hobbyists to pursue creative interests without disturbing neighbors or family members. Woodworking projects that could be accomplished with hand tools became popular evening activities for men seeking productive hobbies that could be pursued during quiet hours. Hand carving, furniture repair, and detailed finish work fit naturally within evening quiet expectations. Model building gained popularity as evening hobby activity that provided detailed work requiring concentration and careful attention. Aircraft models, ship models, train layouts, and similar projects became evening entertainment that combined creativity with peaceful activity. Prayer and meditation found natural support in evening quiet environments. Families and individuals could pursue spiritual activities without competing with entertainment options or electronic distractions. Evening quiet supported contemplative practices that required focused attention. Family prayer time often occurred during evening hours when households gathered for shared spiritual activities before bedtime. Family devotions, bedtime prayers, and spiritual reading became natural components of evening wind-down routines. Personal meditation and contemplative prayer benefited from evening quiet that provided peaceful environments for spiritual reflection and communication with the divine. Evening quiet supported spiritual practices that required freedom from distraction. Regional differences influenced evening quiet patterns significantly. Rural areas experienced more complete quiet due to lower population density and distance from commercial districts. Small towns maintained community quiet through shared expectations about appropriate evening activities. Urban areas maintained relative quiet through community understanding about appropriate evening activities, despite higher population density. Neighborhoods developed informal agreements about evening noise levels and activities that preserved residential tranquility. Geographical features influenced evening quiet patterns, with communities near water, mountains, or forests experiencing different sound environments that shaped local expectations about evening activities and noise levels. Sick care gained gentle quality during evening quiet, when patients could rest in peaceful environments. Evening care for ill family members proceeded more calmly when households weren't managing competing entertainment demands. Quiet environments supported healing and recovery processes. Home nursing care for sick family members benefited from evening quiet that provided peaceful environments for rest and recovery. Quiet environments supported sleep, reduced stress, and created conditions that promoted healing. Elderly care often centered around evening routines that acknowledged natural quiet preferences and earlier bedtimes. Evening care for aging family members worked with rather than against natural circadian rhythms that favored earlier sleep and quieter activities. Study groups and educational activities adapted to evening quiet by focusing on discussion and reading, rather than more active learning methods. Evening education took advantage of quiet environments that supported concentration and thoughtful engagement with learning materials. Adult education classes often met during evening hours, when participants could focus on learning activities without competing distractions. Evening education provided opportunities for personal development and skill building during peaceful hours that supported concentration. Home study activities benefited from evening quiet that provided peaceful environments for reading, research, and educational projects. Students of all ages found evening hours conducive to learning activities that required sustained attention and concentration. Emergency services maintained different evening protocols that acknowledged community quiet expectations. Police patrols, fire department activities, and medical responses operated more quietly during evening hours when possible, respecting sleeping neighbors while maintaining emergency readiness. Emergency medical services adapted protocols for evening calls that balanced urgent patient care needs with community quiet expectations. Ambulance operations during evening hours attempted to minimize unnecessary noise while providing essential medical services. Police patrol activities during evening hours focused on maintaining community safety while respecting residential quiet expectations. Evening police work emphasized prevention and community presence rather than activities that would disrupt neighborhood tranquility unnecessarily. Visiting patterns between families acknowledged evening quiet expectations. Evening social visits typically involved quieter activities, conversation, card games, music, rather than more energetic daytime entertainment options. Social expectations adapted to evening's contemplative character. Family visiting traditions often centered around evening hours when households were available for social activities, but expected quieter entertainment options. Evening visits provided social connection while respecting community expectations about noise levels. Extended family gatherings during evening hours created opportunities for meaningful conversation and relationship building that benefited from quiet environments. Evening family time gained importance as primary social activity. Transportation operated more quietly during evening hours. Automobile traffic decreased, commercial vehicle movement stopped, and public transportation reduced service levels. The community infrastructure acknowledged evening quiet as a shared value worth protecting. Evening transportation patterns reflected community expectations about quiet hours, with reduced traffic volumes and quieter operation methods that supported residential tranquility. Public transportation systems acknowledged evening quiet through reduced service and quieter operations. Personal transportation choices during evening hours often prioritized quiet operation and minimal community disturbance. People walking rather than driving, choosing quieter routes, and operating vehicles more quietly demonstrated respect for community evening quiet. Work patterns respected evening quiet boundaries. Most employment ended before full darkness arrived, allowing workers to participate in evening family and community activities. Evening work was typically limited to essential services that required 24-hour coverage. Agricultural work patterns acknowledged evening quiet through scheduling that completed noisy activities during daylight hours, while reserving evening hours for quieter farm tasks that didn't disturb rural community tranquility. Professional work that continued into evening hours adapted to community quiet expectations by reducing noise levels and limiting activities that would disturb residential areas. Evening professional work balanced productivity needs with community quiet values. Exercise and physical activity adapted to evening quiet requirements. Organized sports and energetic outdoor activities occurred during daylight hours, while evening exercise focused on walking, gentle calisthenics, and other activities that didn't disturb neighbors or disrupt community quiet. Individual exercise routines during evening hours emphasized activities appropriate to approaching bedtime and community quiet expectations. Evening exercise promoted health, while supporting rather than competing with peaceful community environments. Community exercise groups that met during evening hours focused on activities compatible with quiet environments. Walking groups, gentle exercise classes, yoga sessions that provided health benefits while maintaining community tranquility. Animal care adjusted to evening quiet patterns. Farm animals settled into quieter evening routines that matched human activity levels. Pet care included evening activities that acknowledged pets' needs while respecting community expectations about noise and disruption. Evening animal care routines created peaceful activities that connected people with natural rhythms while maintaining appropriate noise levels for community quiet. Farm animals and household pets learned evening behavior patterns that matched human quiet expectations. Livestock management during evening hours focused on quiet activities that provided necessary animal care while respecting rural community quiet expectations. Evening farm chores balanced animal welfare needs with neighbor consideration. Food preparation supported evening quiet through cooking methods and timing that avoided excessive noise during neighbors' rest periods. Evening cooking focused on gentle preparation methods rather than equipment and techniques that would disturb quiet neighborhood environments. Evening meal preparation became meditative activities that combined necessary household tasks with peaceful domestic routines that fit naturally within quiet community environments. Gentle cooking methods supported both family needs and community quiet. Food preservation activities during evening hours provided productive work that could be accomplished quietly while contributing to household food security. Canning, preserving, and food storage activities became evening projects that combined productivity with peaceful work. Maintenance activities shifted to daytime hours, when noise would be more acceptable to neighbors. Evening home maintenance focused on quiet tasks that could be completed without power tools or activities that would disturb community tranquility. Home maintenance scheduling acknowledged community quiet expectations by concentrating noisy repair and improvement activities during daytime hours while reserving evening hours for quiet maintenance tasks that didn't disturb neighbors. Household organization activities often occurred during evening hours when quiet activities were appropriate and family members could work together on organizing and cleaning tasks that improved home environments without creating noise. Social gatherings adapted to evening quiet expectations through activities and entertainment choices that enhanced rather than competed with peaceful evening environments. Community events during evening hours featured appropriate entertainment that respected neighbors' desires for quiet. Community social events during evening hours emphasized activities compatible with quiet environments, lectures, discussions, gentle entertainment that brought people together while maintaining community tranquility expectations. Private social gatherings during evening hours developed entertainment patterns appropriate to quiet community environments, with conversation, music, and activities that provided social connection without disturbing neighborhood peace. Education systems acknowledged evening quiet by limiting school activities that would require evening noise or disrupt family quiet time. School events during evening hours focused on activities appropriate to quiet environments, such as lectures, performances, and discussion groups. School programming during evening hours served adult education needs and community activities, while respecting residential quiet expectations. Evening school activities balanced educational goals with community quiet values. Parent-teacher activities and school meetings during evening hours operated within quiet expectations that acknowledged family bedtime routines and community tranquility needs. School evening events supported educational goals while respecting community quiet. Economic activities adapted to evening quiet expectations by concentrating commercial activity during daytime hours, when noise and traffic were more acceptable. Evening business operations were limited to essential services that communities needed during quiet hours. Commercial development patterns acknowledged evening quiet through business practices and operating schedules that supported rather than competed with residential tranquility. Evening economic activity balanced business needs with community quiet expectations. Local economic development respected evening quiet through planning and zoning practices that protected residential areas from commercial noise during evening hours. Economic growth occurred within frameworks that preserved community quiet values. Communication systems operated more quietly during evening hours, with telephone conversations conducted in lower voices and less frequent calling that acknowledged evening as family and rest time rather than active communication periods. Telephone usage patterns during evening hours reflected community expectations about quiet time, with shorter conversations conducted in quieter voices that respected household members preparing for sleep. Community communication during evening hours emphasized essential rather than social communication, with understanding that evening hours were reserved for family time and rest rather than extensive social conversation. Entertainment options reflected evening quiet values through activities that could be pursued peacefully without disturbing others. Evening entertainment emphasized quiet pursuits that individuals and families could enjoy while maintaining community tranquility. Reading became primary evening entertainment for individuals and families, with libraries, bookstores, and personal book collections, providing entertainment appropriate to quiet evening environments that supported concentration and imagination. Musical entertainment during evening hours emphasized gentle performances and activities compatible with community quiet expectations. Family music, community, singing, and soft instrumental music provided entertainment that enhanced rather than competed with evening tranquility. Technology development during the evening quiet era focused on equipment and systems that operated quietly enough not to disturb peaceful evening environments. Household equipment was designed to function appropriately within community quiet expectations. Early radio technology developed with consideration for evening quiet through programming and operation methods that provided entertainment without overwhelming peaceful evening environments. Radio became evening companion rather than dominant entertainment. Lighting technology supported evening quiet through warm, gentle illumination that created peaceful environments appropriate to contemplative activities and gradual transition towards sleep. Evening lighting enhanced rather than competed with natural quiet. Professional services adapted schedules to protect evening quiet while providing necessary services. Medical care, emergency services, and essential business operations found ways to serve community needs without compromising evening tranquility when possible. Medical services during evening hours balanced urgent patient care needs with community quiet expectations by developing protocols that provided necessary care while minimizing unnecessary disturbance of residential areas. Professional consultation services often scheduled evening appointments that served client needs while respecting community quiet expectations through quiet operation methods and consideration for residential neighbors. Military operations in civilian areas acknowledged evening quiet expectations by scheduling activities and training that minimized disruption to community rest periods. Military facilities near residential areas adapted their operations to respect civilian quiet needs during evening hours. Military-community relations included consideration for evening quiet expectations, with base operations that balanced military training needs with civilian community quiet values. Evening military activities acknowledged neighborhood impacts. Military family life adapted to community evening quiet expectations while maintaining military schedule requirements. Military families balanced military obligations with civilian community quiet standards during evening hours. Cultural activities flourished within evening quiet frameworks through performances and events that enhanced rather than competed with peaceful evening environments. Community culture developed around quiet entertainment options that brought people together while maintaining tranquil evening atmosphere. Community cultural events during evening hours featured performances and activities appropriate to quiet environments, chamber music, poetry readings, discussion groups that provided cultural enrichment while respecting community quiet expectations. Cultural institution programming during evening hours served community cultural needs while operating within quiet expectations that acknowledged residential neighbors and family evening routines. Culture enhanced rather than competed with community tranquility. Religious observance gained support from evening quiet environments that provided appropriate settings for contemplative worship and spiritual activities. Evening religious services benefited from quiet environments that supported prayer, meditation, and spiritual reflection. Evening religious activities developed around contemplative worship appropriate to quiet environments and reflective evening hours. Evening prayer services, meditation groups, and spiritual study gained from peaceful settings. Religious community activities during evening hours provided spiritual fellowship while respecting community quiet expectations through activities and practices that enhanced rather than competed with evening tranquility. Agricultural activities adjusted to evening quiet expectations while maintaining necessary farm operations. Evening farm work focused on quiet tasks that could be completed without disturbing rural neighbors who shared agricultural communities. Farm animal care during evening hours balanced livestock welfare needs with rural community quiet expectations through scheduling and methods that provided necessary care while respecting neighbor tranquility. Agricultural equipment usage during evening hours emphasized quiet activities and hand tools, rather than powered equipment that would disturb rural community quiet. Evening farm work supported agricultural productivity while maintaining community peace. Construction and development projects respected evening quiet by limiting activities to daytime hours, when noise would be more acceptable to surrounding communities. Building projects planned around community quiet expectations rather than purely economic efficiency considerations. Construction scheduling acknowledged community quiet expectations by concentrating noisy activities during daytime hours while avoiding evening construction that would disturb residential quiet and family rest periods. Development planning included consideration for community evening quiet through project design and scheduling that balanced development needs with community quiet values and residential neighbor consideration. Public safety services operated within evening quiet frameworks by developing protocols that protected community safety while respecting evening tranquility. Emergency response procedures balanced urgent safety needs with consideration for community quiet expectations. Law enforcement activities during evening hours emphasized community safety while respecting residential quiet expectations through patrol methods and response protocols that balance security needs with neighbor consideration. Fire safety services adapted evening operations to balance emergency preparedness with community quiet expectations, maintaining readiness while minimizing unnecessary disturbance of residential areas during quiet hours. Transportation systems acknowledged evening quiet through reduced service levels and quieter operation methods during evening hours. Public transportation and commercial vehicle traffic adapted schedules to minimize disruption of community evening quiet periods. Public transportation evening schedules balanced service needs with community quiet expectations by reducing service frequency and operating more quietly during residential quiet hours. Commercial transportation patterns during evening hours respected community quiet through reduced activity levels and quieter operation methods that acknowledged residential neighbor needs for peaceful evening environments. Commercial development reflected evening quiet values through business practices and facility design that supported rather than competed with community tranquility expectations. Businesses operating during evening hours developed appropriate practices that respected neighborhood quiet. Retail business evening operations balanced customer service needs with community quiet expectations through practices that served evening customers while respecting residential neighbor tranquility. Service industry evening operations developed business practices that provided necessary services while operating within community quiet expectations that acknowledged residential areas and family evening routines. Environmental conditions supported evening quiet through natural sound patterns and wildlife behavior that created peaceful evening settings. Evening environments provided natural quiet that human communities enhanced through appropriate activity choices and community cooperation. Natural sound environments during evening hours provided peaceful settings that human communities enhanced through activity choices that worked with rather than against natural quiet patterns. Wildlife behavior patterns during evening hours created natural quiet that human communities respected and enhanced through activities and practices that supported rather than competed with natural evening tranquility. Healthcare services adapted to evening quiet expectations while maintaining necessary medical care availability. Evening medical care operated within quiet frameworks that supported patient healing while respecting community tranquility needs. Medical practice evening operations balanced patient care needs with community quiet expectations through scheduling and procedures that provided necessary health care while respecting residential neighbor tranquility. Healthcare facility evening operations developed practices that served patient needs while operating within community quiet expectations that acknowledged residential areas and family rest periods. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the quiet began changing. New sounds crept into evening hours. The distant hum of air conditioning units working through summer nights, the blue glow of television sets flickering behind curtained windows, the occasional sound of automobiles traveling residential streets after traditional quiet hours. The transition happened unevenly across different communities and regions. Some areas maintained evening quiet longer than others. Rural communities preserved traditional patterns, while urban areas adapted more quickly to increased evening activity and noise levels. Suburban communities experienced the most complex transitions as they balanced rural quiet traditions with urban entertainment expectations. Suburban evening patterns evolved gradually, incorporating new activities while attempting to preserve some traditional quiet values. New entertainment options competed with traditional evening quiet by offering stimulating alternatives to contemplative activities. Television programming, expanded radio shows, and other electronic entertainment encouraged families to stay awake later and engage in more stimulating evening activities. Television introduction changed evening patterns dramatically by providing compelling entertainment that competed with traditional quiet activities. Family evening routines adapted to television programming schedules rather than natural, quiet patterns. Entertainment industry development created commercial pressure for extended evening activity as businesses developed products and services designed to fill evening hours with stimulating rather than contemplative activities. Economic development patterns changed community evening rhythms as businesses extended operating hours, and commercial districts remained active later into the evening. Economic growth created employment and entertainment options that operated during traditional quiet hours. Commercial district development extended business hours to capture evening entertainment markets, changing community patterns by creating commercial activity during traditional quiet hours. Employment patterns evolved to include more evening work opportunities in service industries, entertainment sectors, and retail businesses that operated beyond traditional daytime hours, while community quiet expectations adapted to accommodate changed work schedules. Transportation changes increased evening noise levels through expanded automobile usage, extended public transportation hours, and increased commercial vehicle traffic that continued into traditional quiet periods. Community noise levels increased gradually but persistently. Automobile ownership increases changed transportation patterns during evening hours, with more vehicular traffic continuing into traditional quiet periods as people used cars for evening entertainment and social activities. Public transportation extensions provided evening service that served changing community needs while contributing to increased noise levels during traditional quiet hours. Lifestyle changes encouraged more active evening schedules as people sought entertainment and social opportunities that extended beyond traditional quiet evening activities. Social expectations evolved to include more stimulating evening options and later bedtime schedules. Social activity patterns changed to include more evening entertainment options outside the home, with restaurants, theaters, sports events, and other activities that competed with traditional quiet evening family time. Recreation industry development created evening entertainment options that encouraged people to leave their homes for active entertainment, rather than pursuing quiet home activities during traditional evening hours. Children's schedules changed to accommodate increased evening activities and entertainment options. Bedtime routines shifted later as families adapted to television programming schedules and other entertainment that competed with traditional early evening wind-down patterns. Youth activity programs expanded into evening hours, providing structured activities that serve children's needs while changing family evening patterns and community quiet expectations. School activity scheduling extended into evening hours through sports programs, music activities, and educational events that required family participation during traditional quiet hours. Employment patterns evolved to include more evening work opportunities in service industries, entertainment, and other sectors that operated beyond traditional daytime hours. Evening employment created economic opportunities while changing community quiet patterns. Service industry growth created employment opportunities during evening hours as restaurants, retail businesses, and entertainment venues extended operating hours to serve changing community needs and preferences. Professional service extensions provided evening appointment availability that served client convenience while requiring professional workers to adapt to evening schedules that extended beyond traditional work hours. Technology development accelerated toward entertainment and communication systems that operated during evening hours, creating products and services designed to fill evening time with stimulating activities rather than supporting traditional quiet pursuits. Electronic entertainment development focused on products designed for evening use, with television, radio, and other technologies that provided compelling alternatives to traditional quiet evening activities. Communication technology advances provided evening entertainment and social connection options that competed with traditional family evening time and quiet community patterns. Urban planning evolved to accommodate increased evening activity through extended commercial hours, evening entertainment districts, and transportation systems that supported later evening schedules. Community design reflected changing evening activity patterns. Zoning changes accommodated commercial development that operated during evening hours, balancing business development needs with residential quiet expectations through planning that attempted to manage conflicts between commercial activity and residential tranquility. Infrastructure development supported increased evening activity through expanded utility services, street lighting, and public facilities that enabled extended community activity during traditional quiet hours. Family patterns adapted to include more evening activities outside the home, with sports, entertainment, social events, and other activities that competed with traditional quiet evening family time. Family schedules became more complex and demanding. Family entertainment choices expanded to include evening activities that required leaving home for movies, restaurants, sports events, and social activities that competed with traditional quiet evening home time. Family schedule coordination became more complex as different family members pursued evening activities that required transportation and time management beyond traditional quiet evening routines. Social expectations changed to include more stimulating evening entertainment options and later bedtime schedules that reflected increased availability of evening activities and entertainment choices. Community social patterns evolved away from traditional quiet expectations. Community social activity patterns evolved to include evening entertainment and social events that operated during traditional quiet hours, changing expectations about appropriate evening activities and noise levels. Generational differences developed around evening activity preferences, with younger people embracing extended evening entertainment, while older residents maintained preferences for traditional quiet patterns. Educational institutions extended evening programming through night classes, extended school activities, and educational entertainment that operated during traditional quiet hours. Education adapted to serve people whose schedules included evening learning opportunities. Adult education programs expanded into evening hours to serve working adults whose daytime schedules prevented educational participation, creating evening educational opportunities while changing community quiet patterns. Continuing education services provided evening classes and programs that served community learning needs, while operating during traditional quiet hours that required adaptation of both educational and community patterns. Cultural institutions developed evening programming that provided entertainment and cultural activities during hours previously devoted to quiet family and individual pursuits. Museums, theaters, and community centers extended their services into evening hours. Theater and performance activities expanded evening programming to serve entertainment demand while operating during traditional quiet hours, requiring balance between cultural service and community quiet expectations. Museum and cultural facility evening programming provided educational and entertainment opportunities during hours traditionally devoted to family quiet time, changing cultural institution roles in community life. Commercial development accelerated toward businesses and services that operated during evening hours, creating economic activity and employment opportunities that changed traditional community quiet patterns. Evening commercial activity became normal rather than exceptional. Retail business expansion into evening hours provided shopping convenience while changing community patterns by creating commercial activity during traditional quiet periods that required adaptation of community noise expectations. Restaurant and food service evening operations expanded to serve entertainment and dining demand, while operating during traditional quiet hours that required balance between business activity and residential quiet expectations. Communication systems evolved to support increased evening social and business activity through telephone systems, broadcasting, and other technologies that facilitated communication during hours previously devoted to quiet family time. Telephone usage patterns changed to include more evening social and business communication as people adapted to extended evening schedules that required coordination and social connection during traditional quiet hours. Broadcasting services expanded evening programming to serve entertainment demand while operating during traditional quiet hours, changing community sound environments and family entertainment patterns. Healthcare systems adapted to serve populations with extended evening activity schedules by providing medical services during hours traditionally devoted to quiet rest and family time. Medical care evolved to serve changing community lifestyle patterns. Medical practice scheduling adapted to serve patients whose evening activities required healthcare services during traditional quiet hours, balancing patient service needs with community quiet expectations. Emergency medical services adapted to serve communities with increased evening activity levels while maintaining appropriate response protocols that balanced urgent care needs with community quiet expectations. Public safety services expanded to manage increased evening activity levels and changing community patterns that required law enforcement, emergency services, and public safety coverage during hours previously characterized by community quiet. Law enforcement activities increased during evening hours to serve communities with extended evening activity patterns while maintaining appropriate response methods that balanced public safety needs with community quiet expectations. Emergency response services adapted to serve communities with increased evening activity while developing protocols that balanced urgent response needs with community quiet expectations during residential hours. Infrastructure development evolved to support increased evening activity through expanded utility services, transportation systems, and public facilities that operated during hours traditionally devoted to community quiet and family rest. Utility service extensions provided electrical, water, and other services that supported increased evening activity while managing infrastructure impacts on residential areas during traditional quiet hours. Public facility evening operations expanded to serve communities with increased evening activity needs while balancing service provision with community quiet expectations during residential hours. Environmental conditions changed in response to increased human evening activity, with altered wildlife patterns, increased artificial lighting, and changed sound environments that reflected new community activity levels during traditional quiet hours. Light pollution increases changed natural evening environments as communities added artificial lighting to support increased evening activity, affecting natural quiet patterns and wildlife behavior. Sound environment changes reflected increased human evening activity through transportation, commercial activity, and entertainment that changed natural quiet patterns in both urban and rural communities. Some communities attempted to preserve evening quiet through local ordinances and community agreements that protected traditional quiet hours while accommodating necessary modern services. These efforts met with varying success depending on community support and economic pressures. Local noise ordinances developed to balance community quiet expectations with necessary evening services, creating legal frameworks that attempted to preserve residential tranquility while allowing essential evening activities. Community organization efforts worked to preserve traditional evening quiet through neighborhood agreements and social pressure that encouraged appropriate evening activities while discouraging disruptive noise during traditional quiet hours. Individual families developed personal quiet traditions within changing community patterns, creating home environments that preserved some traditional evening quiet while adapting to new entertainment and activity options. Personal choice replaced community-wide patterns. Family quiet hour establishment became personal choice rather than community expectation, with individual families creating home quiet traditions that preserved some traditional evening patterns despite changed community environments. Personal quiet space creation within homes provided individual family members with opportunities for traditional quiet activities, despite increased family evening activity and changed community quiet patterns. Older residents often maintained traditional evening quiet preferences while adapting to changed community conditions. Generational differences in evening preferences reflected different experiences with traditional quiet and modern entertainment options. Elderly quiet preference preservation represented continuity with traditional evening patterns, while requiring adaptation to changed community noise levels and evening activity patterns. Generational evening activity differences created family negotiations around appropriate evening activities and noise levels, as different family members preferred different evening patterns and activities. Seasonal variations in evening activity became more pronounced as summer evening entertainment expanded, while winter evenings retained more traditional quiet characteristics. Seasonal adaptation reflected both natural patterns and available activity options. Summer evening activity expansion reflected increased outdoor entertainment opportunities, while challenging traditional quiet patterns through extended outdoor activities and entertainment that operated during traditional quiet hours. Winter evening pattern preservation often maintained more traditional quiet characteristics as cold weather encouraged indoor activities that were more compatible with traditional evening quiet expectations. Regional differences persisted as some areas maintained more traditional evening quiet, while others embraced extended evening activity patterns. Geographic and cultural factors influenced how communities adapted to changing evening entertainment and activity options. Rural area quiet preservation often continued longer than urban area adaptations, reflecting population density differences and cultural values that supported traditional evening quiet patterns, despite changing technology and entertainment options. Urban area Evening activity adoption reflected population density and economic opportunities that supported extended evening entertainment and activity options while challenging traditional quiet expectations. Professional services adapted to serve clients with extended evening schedules while maintaining appropriate standards for community quiet when possible. Service industries balanced customer needs with community expectations about evening noise and activity levels. Professional evening service provision balanced client convenience with community quiet expectations through scheduling and operation methods that provided necessary services while respecting residential neighbor tranquility. Business evening hour extensions served customer convenience while requiring adaptation of business practices to operate within community quiet expectations during residential hours. Religious institutions adapted evening programming to compete with increased entertainment options, while maintaining appropriate spiritual focus during traditional contemplative evening hours. Religious services evolved to serve communities with changed evening schedule expectations. Religious evening service adaptation balanced spiritual community needs with competition from increased entertainment options while maintaining appropriate contemplative focus during traditional quiet hours. Religious community activity evening scheduling served community spiritual needs while operating within changed evening activity patterns that required coordination with increased secular entertainment options. The memory of evening quiet persisted in community expectations and individual preferences, even as actual quiet became less common or required more intentional creation. Cultural memory preserved awareness of traditional evening patterns despite changed community practices. Community quiet memory preservation occurred through stories, cultural traditions, and individual preferences that maintained awareness of traditional evening patterns, despite changed community noise levels and activity options. Individual quiet memory influence affected personal evening preferences and family traditions that preserved elements of traditional evening quiet, despite changed community and technological circumstances. Some individuals and families actively chose to preserve evening quiet through personal practices and household routines that created peaceful evening environments, despite community changes toward increased evening activity and entertainment options. Personal evening quiet maintenance required conscious choice and household discipline to preserve traditional quiet patterns, despite community changes and increased evening entertainment options that competed with quiet family time. Family quiet tradition preservation occurred through personal choices and household practices that maintained elements of traditional evening quiet, despite changed community patterns and increased entertainment options. Environmental awareness developed around the loss of natural quiet as communities recognized connections between evening quiet and wildlife patterns, sleep health, and community well-being that had been supported by traditional quiet evening environments. Natural quiet value recognition increased as communities experienced consequences of lost evening quiet and developed awareness of connections between quiet environments and community health and well-being. Wildlife impact awareness developed as communities recognized how increased evening noise and activity affected natural patterns and wildlife behavior that had adapted to traditional human quiet patterns. Cultural preservation efforts attempted to maintain traditional evening activities and quiet pursuits through community programs, educational initiatives, and cultural events that demonstrated the value of traditional evening quiet for family and community life. Traditional activity preservation programs worked to maintain community awareness of quiet evening activities and their benefits for family relationships and community connections, despite changed entertainment options. Educational quiet value programs attempted to teach younger generations about traditional evening quiet and its benefits for family life, community connections, and personal well-being, despite changed technological and entertainment circumstances. In the end, evening quiet had been more than the absence of noise. It had been a community agreement about appropriate timing, a shared understanding that different hours called for different activities, a recognition that some parts of daily life required protection from stimulation and entertainment. The quiet had shaped sleep patterns, family relationships, and community connections in ways that filled evenings could not replicate. When evening activity replaced evening quiet, something changed in how people experienced the transition from day to night, from active to restful, from social to solitary. Evening quiet had taught patience, supported concentration, and protected time for activities that required protection from distraction. The quiet had created space for reflection, family connection, and personal restoration that prepared people for sleep and renewed energy for the following day. The rhythm of quiet evenings had supported natural circadian patterns, family communication, and community relationships that required time and space for development. Evening quiet had been infrastructure for family life and community connection rather than simply the absence of entertainment options. But in some houses, at certain times, the old quiet still descended. In the pause after dinner dishes were finished, in the moment when children settled with books, in the spaces between electronic entertainment. Evening quiet survived in fragments, reminding families and communities of rhythms that had once seemed as natural as sunset. When evening quiet was part of life, people learned different lessons about rest, about family time, about the value of contemplation and the necessity of peaceful transition between day and night. The quiet had taught patience, supported concentration, and protected time for activities that required protection from distraction. Sometimes, in the space between turning off the television and falling asleep, in the pause before checking one more message, in the moment when outside noise finally quieted enough to hear the settling sounds of houses and neighborhoods preparing for rest, people remembered the weight of evening quiet, how it had felt to let the day end gently, to transition gradually toward sleep, to trust that tomorrow's activities could wait until tomorrow's light. The evening quiet had been both sound and silence, presence and absence, a quality of time rather than simply the absence of noise. When evenings were quiet, night could arrive naturally, darkness could bring peace, and families could learn to rest together in the gentle ending of each day. The quiet had been a gift that communities gave themselves, a shared recognition that sometimes required protection. Some hours deserved peace. Some moments needed silence to reveal their gifts. In the memory of evening quiet lived the possibility of its return, not as nostalgia for a lost past, but as recognition of human needs that persistent noise could not satisfy, as acknowledgement of rhythms that busyness could not replace, as understanding of peace that entertainment could not provide. When evenings were quiet, people learned to listen to each other, to themselves, to the subtle sounds of community settling into rest. The listening had been as important as the quiet, the attention as valuable as the peace, the presence as necessary as the silence.